Just a little technical stuff here and there. All right. We'll get started. Kia ora tato. Welcome back to another Q&A here at Digital Boost. I'm Georgia Hatzis, your host. And today I have the pleasure of hosting Sam Leggett again from CERT NZ. I'm really excited to have you back, Sam, because the last time we met, we learned a lot about cybersecurity and just simple steps we can take to keep our businesses safe online. And if any of you want to go back and look at that in our platform, please do. You can just go into the search bar and find just CERT NZ, and you'll see what we were talking about then, which was great. But today we're going to be talking about Own Your Online, which is a new platform that CERT has put out to help it make it easier for us as small businesses to really absorb this information and not have this complicated way of trying to figure out how to keep our businesses safe. And Sam, I had the pleasure of seeing Sam in person. We had an event for CERT where we got to meet, and there was a beautiful event where we got to see artwork based on people who had been cyber hacked or who had been violated through such a strong word being violated through cyber attacks. And it was really interesting to see the different stories. And you said those are also on Own Your Online, but we'll talk about that later. So I'm just going to introduce you again, Sam. Welcome back. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Kia ora, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back and talk about cybersecurity again, hopefully with a little bit of a positive spin this time around what we can do, making it a little bit easier and having one centralized point that we can go for all this information. Just very quickly, for those who don't know who CERT New Zealand is, we are the computer emergency response team for the nation. And what does that mean? We're all about cybersecurity and improving cybersecurity and online resilience for everyone in New Zealand, whether they be an individual, a business owner, even a large organization owner in NZ. A few ways that we do that. One, we have an online reporting form that anyone can use to report a cybersecurity incident through to us. We respond to those reports with advice and guidance on how to deal with that incident and actually how to set yourself up in a more secure position moving forward. There's a lot of collaboration and engagement with various organizations in New Zealand, much like Digital Boost, who we love working with. And putting that information, guidance, awareness, advice out there as much as we can, as wide as possible, trying to share the message on cybersecurity, what the risks are, and what people can do to keep themselves safe.
You know, it's funny, Sam, because I imagine you as like these black ops, like the government is hiding there with all the cyber stuff. But yeah,
that's often how it's seen. Dark basements, black hoodies, behind a keyboard, tapping away, doing all those things. But the reality is, cybersecurity is a pretty big industry now, and there's a lot of roles in cybersecurity. There's a lot to do with it, and a lot of times it's relatively nice people, like the folks at CERT New Zealand, talking about it and trying to share this kind of information. So, speaking of trying to share this information and get it out there, we have to talk about Own Your Online. So this is our new platform. It's not a rebranding of CERT New Zealand. It's a new platform that's designed to take this information, make it easier to understand, to digest for anyone who may not even be in the security space. So you're a business owner, security is not your focus, but the reality is these days, how many businesses can operate without using the internet? I think it's pretty close to zero. So we do need to take some steps to make sure we're nice and safe while we're navigating the internet. So the first thing, when you come to Own Your Online, you'll be met with the homepage, and the first thing that we need to call out is there's a couple of different versions of this site, depending on if you're looking at it as an individual or as a business owner. So the first thing that we do, just tap the For Business little toggle so that we get to the business side of the website. And then on the homepage, the first thing that we're going to talk about is something that you already touched on, Georgia. It's the Exposed campaign. And the idea behind the Exposed campaign is taking real stories from real New Zealanders that have gone through some kind of cybersecurity incident, some kind of scam, that have had significant impact, talking about their stories to bring them to light so that we can help others see what the risks are, what can happen when things go wrong, and hopefully highlight the importance of taking action preemptively to keep yourself secure and make sure things don't go wrong in the first place. Now, there's a lot of stories on the Exposed page, and they range from there's a variety of different types of incidents that occur. Now, the first thing I'll say is that with this image on screen is a gentleman eating his food. He's quite close to his camera, and that might be a little bit uncomfortable to see. That's intentional. The idea here is that we want to highlight the fact that these things can happen at any point in time. At any point during your day, you might get that text message that's a little bit malicious or a little bit dodgy. You might get that phone call or an email, and it might be when you're eating food at your computer, watching your Netflix show. It may be when you're getting ready in the morning for work or something else. It may be when you're sitting in the car and you're getting really nervous because you know you have to present a digital boost in about 15 minutes. This can come through at any time, at any point in time, and it's actually often during times when we expect it least, or maybe we have other things going on in our life that have us distracted or concerned or worried, that we're a little bit more vulnerable to these things actually being successful and creating a victim out of us. So there's a range of different incidents on here, from things like phishing through social media, phishing through text messages. There's some of them actually really highlight how pieces of information can be used against you. So with Tiana, for example, she had an incident where she had a phishing scam through social media, but it was really targeted towards her and her interests based on the information that was available publicly on her social media. So that information on her social media about what she was into, what she was looking at, that was taken to craft the narrative of this phishing campaign to make it that much more convincing when it was sent through to her. Job scams are a common thing. So there's stories about that. There's videos of these people talking about their stories as well. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, because working in cybersecurity and seeing these types of things happen, I can talk about them to as many people as possible to try and highlight what the risks are and what the impacts could be. But when you hear it from someone that's actually lived it, has gone through it, has had that experience themselves, it just has a little bit more impact in helping us understand that this isn't just, we might lose some money, we might lose access to business assets. There's a huge emotional, mental toll that can come with these types of incidents as well. Unauthorized access to our online accounts. There's a range of stories up here, and I've just noticed there's a quote from myself as well. So I do encourage you to check that out. There's a bunch of stories on there at the moment, and these will be updated as more stories become available as well. That's the first thing that we wanted to talk about with on your online. And like I say, that will be updated as time goes on. Much like the rest of the site, it's only in its at very early phases. So the information that's on there is really, really great, but we are always looking to put more information on there, make that information more robust, more usable, and constantly update and upgrade the site as time goes on. At the top, we've got four buttons for navigation. We're going to go through what this section looks like. The Get Help Now section is just about helping you understand what to do if you are dealing with an incident. So the first thing that it'll direct you to do is report to CERT New Zealand so you can get that advice and guidance on the incident that you are dealing with specifically. Now, of course, if anyone is in any kind of immediate danger, I encourage you to call the police on 111. That's the most important thing. If anyone is at risk physically, make sure that that's handled first. A few other things on here, the common scenarios, there's some really useful information here. So again, what to do after reporting an incident. There's a guide on how to sort of navigate that. One that I'd really draw attention to is the communications framework. So communicating in an online incident. This basically will give you some advice and information on how to share within your organization what's going on, but also put information out publicly for your customers, your clients to understand what's going on as well. Now, I know that can be a little bit scary. If you're dealing with a cybersecurity incident, you might think the last thing that you want to do is tell your customers, hey, something's gone wrong. The reality is, if you have outages on your site, then they probably know something's up anyway. And it's actually a lot better to be upfront and say, we are aware something's going on and we are working on it, than it is to pretend that nothing is happening, especially when those outages occur. And actually what we've often seen is that when organizations are upfront, they do front foot that, and they get through that incident, it actually can often have a positive impact on their relationship with their customers, because they told the customers what was going on and they kept their customers up to date as they went through it. Look, things go wrong for all types of organizations. Even the biggest ones out there have cybersecurity incidents occurring. How we handle those incidents is often the most important thing.
Well, Sam, not to cut you off, but what I love about what we're talking about here is the idea of shame and all of that shame and the emotional part that gets involved in any kind of cyber attack, where you're saying, look, let's put that aside. Let's make sure that we take care. What are the steps to keep everyone safe? Not only ourselves and our businesses, but our consumers and everyone. Shame aside, that's not important. And that's how they're going to keep getting us. The more we stay locked in that emotional battle with what's happening. I love this, because the more we understand it, the easier it's going to get for us. So You
Yeah,
know, just
absolutely. And that's a really great point when we think about exposed, because the more we start to tell our stories, the more we don't give into that shame and we do share information. Well, maybe our story is the story that helps keep the next organization safe from the same thing that we dealt with. And maybe talking about it, we bring to light what these bad actors, what the malicious actors are doing, and we help keep each other safe. At the end of the day, these attacks only occur because the bad actors are doing the bad things. So if you want someone to blame for what went wrong, whilst yes, you can take a step back and say, okay, maybe there's some stuff that I can be doing better. And that's absolutely a great position to take. At the end of the day, the bad stuff happens because the bad people do it. So if you want someone to really blame the people that sent the email, sent the scam, got you on the phone, not yourself. The shame is not something that we should be giving into. And we want to break that stigma down by bringing as many stories to life as we possibly can. Understanding the risk to your business is really, really important, because by knowing what risks you have to your business, you can then start to determine what controls you need to put in place to keep things safe. So the third thing on this page is an online security risk assessment for your business. You go to that page, that'll give you some advice and step you through how to run a risk assessment, what the keys are for that kind of assessment, and what the beneficial outcomes are, like what controls you need to put in place. And then another additional guide is just choosing an IT service provider. That can be really difficult. There's so many out there. How do you know what you need? Who's providing the best service? So a guide like that, just to understand the kinds of questions that you should be asking these providers before you really lock in, is a really great step to take before you do sign up with anyone in particular. Now, the next tab that I want to talk about is the scam check for businesses. Like, this is an indicative tool. It's not going to be a catch-all. It's not going to catch every single incident, but it's a really good way to start creating a mental checklist in your own mind for the things that you should be looking out for in text messages and emails and social media posts and messages, phone calls, or even websites. So say you get a text message and you're just not sure if it's legitimate or not, something doesn't seem quite right, or you've never got a text message from that organization before, anything that sparks any kind of concern, you can head to the On Your Online website, come to this page, click on that text tab, and there'll be some basic questions to ask. Was the sender unfamiliar to you? And look, we're going to go through some specific examples of phishing, just because phishing is so widely seen, especially for organizations, and it can actually cause some pretty significant incidents occurring. So we're going to deep dive into what we should be looking for. But is the sender unfamiliar to you? Have you gotten an email from that address before, or a text message from that address before, or even that organization, if they contacted you before? Are you being asked to take action, pay a fee, log into your account to fix an issue? Is there some kind of call to action? And usually that's based on some sense of urgency as well. So we need you to log into your account to update your details, because otherwise your account's going to be disabled in 24 hours. That's that call to action followed by that sense of urgency. And this is such a common thing that these attackers are using, is that sense of urgency to try and create some fear and some panic so that you click on those links or you provide that information without thinking any further. And of course, is there actually a link in the message present? In text phishing, this is the most common vector, is just to have that link in the text message, get you to click on it, and then typically provide some kind of information like login details or credit card information. And if you answer yes to any of those, then you can get a little bit of a pop-up that says, yeah, you're likely dealing with a scam. And the idea here is that, again, those three things are a bit of a mental checklist for you to go through. And you can start applying this to all the emails you get. And I know that sounds like a little bit of a load, but they're just basic things for you to spot in an email when it comes through. And if you start doing that with every email you're getting, then it becomes almost second nature. You get an email, you have a look, you spot the key things. Yeah, that's legitimate, no worries. You get another one. Actually, that sender address doesn't look quite right. Something seems wrong. I should look a little bit deeper. Once we get that in place, it becomes really easy to spot these things. And honestly, anyone can spot these things. I'll use an own story from my life. I shared this information with my mom, who's not the most tech literate, bless her soul. But she actually called me the other day and she said, Sam, I got an email. It didn't look right. I looked through the things you told me, and I know it's phishing. And that was great. That was awesome to see. So honestly, if she can do it, anyone can.
Yay, Mom. Well done. See, you must feel really proud, Sam, giving back to your mom.
Absolutely. It was so great to see that she was spotting those things for herself. And like I say, if she can pick up those tips, then yeah, anyone can do this.
Before we move on, would you mind popping back for the scam check for me? Go back one. So it says identify a scam by, and that was text. So do text, email, social media, are they all the same question? No, they're a little bit different. Each question is a little bit different. Yeah, you've got different.
A bit more specific to the medium that you're particularly dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But these are all good things to help you spot red flags. And like I say, it's not going to catch every single one. But if you have any concerns about a website that you're looking at, for example, then you can come here to the site, go to the website tab, and it's going to give you some things that you can look for to help determine whether or not it's legitimate or not.
Yeah, and I really wanted to highlight what you said earlier about that sense of urgency that these scammers try to put in you. Nothing is that urgent. I know that idea of like, oh my God, my bank account's being drained right this moment. I have to click this link and stop it. Take a pause. Take a pause.
Yeah. Take a breath. Have a look at some of the things that we're talking about. And actually a really good step to take is if something does seem off to you, but you just can't confirm it, have a chat to someone around you, a friend or a family member, even a colleague. See if they have the same kind of concerns, because if they do, that's probably a really good indication that you might be dealing with a scam. And maybe there's someone in your life, like a friend, a family member, or a colleague, who is actually particularly good at spotting these things. I had, you are. We've talked through this, Georgia. Now you may end up being the help desk of your family, but you know what? If you can help them not fall victim to a scam, then maybe that's a good thing.
And it feels good, like you said with your mom. It feels really good to help your family out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next tab that we have for On Your Online is knowing the risks. And if we go to the overall page, this just basically highlights why it's important to know the risks. What can go wrong, and knowing the risks as what enables us to know what we need to do to protect ourselves as well. So why does it matter? How do we actually protect our business? It's going to take us to some other really important pages that we're going to look at, like keeping your business secure online. That's the page that I was just on. So common risks and threats for your business. Now, this is a really good page to look at, and this is based on things that we see actually reported through to us through our online reporting form. So it's relevant. It's actually happening in New Zealand. These are the main threats that we are seeing reported by organisations here in NZ. Data breaches being a big one. It can be a little bit tricky to know when your information is caught in a data breach. This is more sort of talking around when you're an organization, you have information exfiltrated from your environment that may be relevant to your customers or something like that. But it's also really good to call out that our online information, our email addresses, our passwords and things, these are often caught in data breaches, and these can result in things like unauthorized access as well. There's a really good website called haveibeenpwned.com. It sounds funny, I know, but it is a trustworthy website.
Wait, say it again. What is it?
Haveibeenpwned.com, Pwned. Sounds very strange, I know. It's basically a tool where you can plug in key information like your email address, and it will tell you anywhere that your email address has been caught in a data breach. It'll tell you information that was captured in that data breach, like your name, your mobile number, your password, anything else that was caught there. And this is a really great way to tell if your passwords have been caught up. And look, I know we're going to talk about passwords in a bit, but I know passwords can be a pain. And I know that human nature is to create one half-decent password, whack it on all our online accounts and call it a job done. There are risks to that, especially when data breaches occur. And now our one password that we use on 15 accounts is now out there in the wild for attackers to use. So acknowledging when those passwords get caught in data breaches so that we can address them and make sure our accounts are nice and secure is really important as well. And then there's guides on other common attacks, phishing being a huge one. Business email compromise is a pretty significant incident for organizations. That can result in things like invoice scams, invoices being altered before being sent out to customers, providers, etc. Or even invoices coming into your organization that have been altered. So you end up paying an attacker rather than your genuine business partner. Ransomware is a huge issue for organizations and can often result in the end of businesses, which is a real shame, but is important to call out. There's a few things that can be done specific for ransomware, so I do encourage you to jump in and check these guides. Now, you might be thinking, why is artificial intelligence in there? That's not necessarily a threat in and of itself. It's talking about things like how artificial intelligence can be used in phishing scams to create narratives, but also acknowledging the risk that artificial intelligence presents. If you use something like ChatGPT, for example, and you plug a whole bunch of information from your organization into that, it's essentially the same as posting it online. So you need to be aware when these things are connected to outside sources and you're plugging information in, you are essentially sending it to that outside source. Now, that's not something that most people are aware of. And in often cases, people are using things like ChatGPT for genuine purposes to be more efficient in their role, to get more work done, to do it to a high standard. And those are all good reasons, but it's important to understand what these risks are as well. Insider threat sounds a little bit ominous and scary. One thing that I call out there is that often insider threat can actually happen when we're unaware of it. So much like artificial intelligence, plugging information and data into an outside source, insider threat can occur when, say, you're going on a long weekend and there's a little bit of work that you know you need to do. So you send yourself an email to your personal address that has that spreadsheet that you're working on. Inadvertently, you've just sent a whole bunch of sensitive information for your organization outside your organization environment. So those controls that you might have within the organization environment are no longer applicable. And that's where things like insider threat can actually occur. It can often be unintentional and even accidental. And then the next one for know the risks is all about myths. And I actually think this is a really, really important page. I do encourage you to check this one out and have a read, because it's very possible that you actually subscribe to a number of the myths that are on this page. It's not uncommon. And that's why they're on here, because we need to break the common belief that it won't happen to me. The reality these days is if you have an email address and if you have a phone number, I'm going to say with certainty, you are going to receive a phishing email or a phishing text at some point. No longer is it the case that people are being specifically targeted with these things. Certainly that does happen, but for the vast majority of things that we see, these attacks are volumetric. They are trying to send them out to as many people as they possibly can. So simply having an email address or having a phone number that may have made its way out into the realms through, I don't know, sites that you've signed up for that inadvertently sell information for marketing purposes, etc. And then those pieces of information make their way into the wild. You are going to receive these types of things. That's the simple reality. And by acknowledging that, by taking that first step, then we can start to prepare ourselves for when they do come in. A lot of people think that phishing is the only issue. Because we see so much phishing, it's very easy to think, well, it's just the phishing texts that are coming through and the phishing emails that I have to worry about. So if I'm good with those, then I'm good for the rest. But the reality is cybersecurity is a pretty broad umbrella. Phishing is not the only threat. Phishing actually often leads to a whole bunch of other threats as well. Common belief that only big companies are targeted. They have the big bucks, right? They've got the big budgets. They have all the information. So why would they come after my little small, medium business? The reality is, again, these are volumetric and opportunistic in nature. So maybe the big company across the road has $50 million revenue more than you. So you think they're a much more a desirable target for an attacker. But because they're such a bigger organization, they've probably got a dedicated IT security team. It's probably going to be a lot harder for an attacker to get into their environment. But maybe the small to medium business has an easier to breach environment. And maybe they can get in there and maybe they can deliver ransomware. And that's when they can start extorting victims out of money to get their information and their data back. It's just simply not the case that these big companies are the only targets anymore. We're all online, and so we're all a potential target, especially our businesses. There's another common one that an antivirus is the only thing that you need. Look, the truth is that an antivirus software is a really great tool to have on your devices, and I'm absolutely an advocate for it. The good news is that a lot of devices these days actually come with some pretty decent stuff on board anyway. Windows devices coming with Windows Defender, it's a pretty decent program. But of course, you can look for third parties. You can go to places like Trend Micro or Norton to get even better products and improve there. One thing that I'd say is that this is not the be-all, end-all of cybersecurity. Simply having an antivirus software is not going to keep you safe from everything that there is. It's going to do a lot for you, but there are other risks that we need to be aware of. So this is not a catch-all. And actually, there's a few things that I would even recommend looking at before you worry about an antivirus software. We're going to talk about some specific tips that we can do. We can implement ourselves as business owners. So we'll get into that a little bit, but there are a couple of things that I'd even recommend before you worry too much about your antivirus. No one will be able to guess my password. This is a very common belief, and I often enjoy talking about passwords in presentations because It's often the case that you can simply start to talk about the way we create passwords, and you can see faces in the crowd start dropping because you've just basically told them what their password is. We're going to talk about passwords as well when we get to these tips, so we'll go a little bit deeper into that. But it's just important to acknowledge that what you think is a strong password may not actually be particularly strong. So we'll talk about some specifics on how to make a strong password in a bit. I may not go through all these myths, but I do encourage you to check out the webpage. Like I say, it's pretty common that you may actually subscribe to some of these myths as a business owner, and just breaking down them, acknowledging that not necessarily always true is a really important step to take and may actually help you on your cybersecurity journey. And then the last tab that we have is the Get Protected tab. And this is all the good stuff. This is the stuff that we can do. This is stuff that we can put in place to keep ourselves nice and safe. And there's a bunch of guides on this page. This is the overall page. So we will look at the guide specific page. I think there's about 30 something guides on this page so far, 31 guides so far. And like I say, this will constantly be expanded with more information wherever possible. But there's some really useful stuff on here, like how to protect your business with two-factor authentication. I love that that one's highlighted amongst these 6 because it's a super important one. But there's a lot of stuff on here, how to create a security policy. There may be some stuff that sounds a little bit too technical. What's an RDP server? By clicking on that, having a look at that guide, it'll actually explain what these things are. So we're trying to break down what these terminologies mean and make it a little bit easier for people to understand. Remote access software, what types there are out there, how they're being used in various types of scams, how to enable staff working remotely and do it in a way that's a little bit more secure, how to prevent your email from being spoofed and used in other types of scams against other organizations or people, how to educate your staff into how to be a little bit more secure online, choosing that IT service provider. Again, the online assessment for your business and the risks relevant to you. Communicating during a cybersecurity, I could speak for hours just on these guides alone. But there's a lot of really useful stuff in there. And if you're curious about anything particular for your business and security, do encourage you to check out the guides page. Chances are there's a page on it already, and if there isn't, it's probably coming soon.
I know. I was looking at this, Sam, and I was thinking each one of these little blocks could be like a whole lesson on their own. Like we could really dive deep into each one of these. So it's brilliant that it's all right here on this platform.
Yeah, so we're just trying to keep it all in one place. It's nice and easy for people to find all this information. And then the last one is the top online security tips for businesses. I have a slide on this on the slide deck, so we're going to look at what these actually look like. But these are basically the starting point for the organization. So if you absolutely have no idea what to do, where to start, how to do it, I encourage you to check this page out. This will give you the top 11 tips that we recommend for businesses putting security controls that they can put in place. And this is pretty simple stuff like installing software updates, two-factor authentication. These are stealing the tips that I'm about to talk about. Backing up your data. I will call out backing up your data specifically because this is really the golden ticket to recovery when it comes to something like ransomware. Now, just very quickly, ransomware is malicious software that's designed to encrypt all your information, all your data, and all your files, and then extort money out of you in order to get that information, those files back. Backing up your data, and if you have a really good backup that's done regularly and kept secure, then you're probably going to be able to recover your business data, information, all that kind of stuff from those backups without playing the game of that ransom demand. And look, the reality is paying that ransom is no guarantee that you're going to get your information, data, files back. In fact, what we often see is that you don't, and then they ask for another ransom because now they know you're willing to pay. They're going to squeeze for as much as they can. Or maybe they do give you access back, but they exfiltrated the data and now they're threatening to release it unless you pay again. Unfortunately, playing the game of the ransomware attackers is just not a winning game when you're the victim. So having something in place that allows you to recover regardless of what they're doing is really powerful. And in that sense, backups are your friend. Setting up logs just so you can keep a paper trail of what's happening in your environment. So this might be logs for when people are logging into your database, for example. So you can say, okay, there was a data exfiltrated at this point in time. Now we can see who logged in at that point in time. And then you may be able to determine, okay, well, that user account was actually compromised via phishing. It's just a way to sort of track what happened so we can acknowledge the gaps that we have and improve security where those gaps exist. Creating a plan when things go wrong.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just going to go back really quickly to the backup. We had the data backup. We have a quick question. Amy's asking, is a cloud backup service a good idea, or should it be like an external drive type of thing? I think the answer is both, right?
Mm.
Like you want an external drive and cloud backup. You want as much backup as possible.
Yeah. Look, and this might depend on the capacity of your organization. But look, either one is better than neither. Like, let's not let perfect get in the way of good enough. Having some sort of backup process is the best thing in comparison to having nothing. The one thing that I'd say around cloud backup providers is a couple of questions that you'd want to ask of them before you really do commit. The other thing to keep in mind is that going through the cloud, it might make the process overall just a little bit slower because you're essentially downloading all that information. So keeping that in mind, but then also asking that provider, what's your security posture like? Do you offer 2FA on my account, my backups, etc.? Those kinds of questions as well. But bearing in mind that it may just make it a little bit slower, and you may have slightly less control over things like how often you're backing up or how regularly. Then the pros of doing it yourself and having sort of an external hard drive, for example, or some sort of medium like that, is that you can do the backups yourself as often as you want. You can decide that frequency, that cadence. You can store that where you want it, so you can keep it safe the way that you want to. You can make sure only you have access to it, or only a couple of people in the organization do. And then you could actually do what you've just suggested, Georgia, and doing both. Having that cloud backup as an option, but then also having that physical medium as well as sort of a backup option. That might be doing a little bit too much, but depending on the capacity, the appetite of your organization, I encourage you to do a risk assessment like we've talked about, and that'll help you determine these types of things. But there are pros and cons to both, and I think it's just important to acknowledge absolutely, cloud solution is a good way to go if you've got nothing in place right now, especially. But just acknowledge that it may make things a little bit slower when it comes down to actually restoring things. And there's a few questions that you want to ask that provider before you do commit to them. Given that there is a slide for these 11 tips, I'm actually going to jump over to the slides now. But hopefully that's given you a really good rundown of Own Your Online, what the platform looks like, what it's trying to achieve, what kind of information is on there. I think there was one other thing I wanted to touch on, which is not on this page. Might be on the Own Your Online main page. Yep, you can subscribe to updates from Own Your Online. So as new things are coming out, being put on the website, you can keep up to date with what's coming out and see new information as it's released. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to have a look.
Good. I was going to ask you if there was, if you sent out emails or something for that. So that's good. Thank you.
Just on that first homepage, top left, click on Own Your Online. That'll take you back to the homepage. Scroll right to the bottom and you can subscribe there. I'm going to scream through some of this because it's all pretty repetitive. I had slides for the website just in case the actually stepping through on the internet browser didn't quite work because, technology is fun. But then we do come to some tips that we can implement to keep ourselves nice and safe. Sorry, I've gone the wrong way. There we go. Top 11 tips. I'm going to quickly run through some of these. I've talked about a couple already. There's 5 coming up that we're going to talk about in much more depth, so it might be a little bit quick on some of them. Updates coming up, 2FA coming up. We talked about backing up data, talked a little bit about logs. So creating an incident response plan is a really important step to take. As we've acknowledged, things can go wrong even when we're doing as much as we can in security. And often when things do go wrong, the most important thing is how we actually manage that, how we deal with that, what our process is. Now, an incident response plan can change in depth of detail dependent on your organization. And for some, it may simply be acknowledging who you need to call when things are going wrong. It might be simply saying, look, we have an IT service provider, so if something does go wrong, we want to call this number as soon as possible, as soon as we notice something. If that's the entirety of your incident response plan, that's still better than having nothing in place. Because when things are going wrong, it's really common that we start to panic, we start to freak out, we don't know what to do, and simply having in writing, this is the step you take, is really, really powerful. Like I say, there's guides on that online, on Own Your Online, so do check that out if you're interested in how to actually build that plan out. The next tip is updating default credentials. So when we get a new piece of software or a new piece of hardware or something like that, think the modem that you have in your house. When you log in, now for the modem, when you log into the administration settings of that modem or screen, which maybe some people have never done, you often have default credentials that come with it so that you can log in initially. Those credentials are only designed for that initial login phase. So you want to change those default credentials as soon as possible after you've logged in there. And the reason is that attackers know what these default credentials are. And often that's how they get into things, is because we haven't updated those default credentials. They know what those default credentials are. They've gotten into the system, into the hardware, whatever it may be. That question was actually really fortuitous, because one of the tips is all about using cloud services. The reason being is because everything's online these days, and sometimes cloud services are just a little bit easier. You can outsource a lot of this security stuff to service providers. So using those service providers is definitely not a bad thing to do at all. There are various pages that link to the guide on how to select IT service providers, some questions that you want to ask them, some things to look for before really committing to one. And the next one is only collecting data that you need. The reason being is that the more information that we have, often the more risk that is posed to our organization if that information gets out. So one of the best things we can do is actually collect as little as possible. If you don't need the data to do your job, to do your function, then maybe think about not actually collecting it from the customer. That way, you don't have to keep the data that you don't collect safe. It just makes things a little bit easier for yourself and your organization. Securing your devices is also really important. Now, that might be having a password on login. That might be having some level of 2FA. That might be encrypting the hard drives. There's a lot that can go into that. Simply having some form of protection on your device, like a password on login or a PIN or a biometric challenge, something like that, is a really great step to take. How many people these days stay auto-logged into things, have passwords saved in browsers, all these types of things, and that's something that we could talk about as well. But having some level of protection on your device in case you lose it is a really important step to take. Securing your networks, I'm going to mention again what I did before, default credentials on things like a modem or a router. Now, I'm just going to take a quick change in tax to the individual space. Think about your home network, think about your home modem for a second. What a lot of people don't realize is that if you take your public IP address and you plug it into your web browser while you're connected to your modem, you can get to your modem's administration settings. And this is where you can change a lot of things like the name of your network, the password for your network, etc. And when you log into that administration settings screen, you're asked to enter your credentials. Far too many modems come with default credentials of admin, username admin, password admin. And you may not think that's something that's important to change, but actually it's really important that we change those things. That's a common way that attackers can get into home networks, and then that can cause issues for a whole bunch of other devices. So that's one side of securing your networks. And then the other side is actually just having a really decent password on those networks, not allowing anyone to sort of access them. Those free and open Wi-Fi networks are actually a pretty significant risk. So securing them, locking them down with a decent password that your staff knows, but isn't something that could sort of easily be guessed by anyone walking the street is a good step to take. And then the last one that we'll talk about is checking new or unusual requests. And the one where I think about this most is in the invoice scam space. So if you get an invoice coming through from a business that you work with regularly, but there's a change in bank account, and that hasn't happened for a while with this organization, that seems a little bit out of ordinary. What you might think to do is call them on the number that's also listed on the invoice. What I would encourage you to do is have a system in place where you can check things with your suppliers, with your customers. You can check changes like this in a way that you know is genuine. So you have a phone number that's listed on your customer or client list. You can give them a call and you can say, hey, look, the bank account number's been changed. We just want to confirm that that's legitimate. The reason I say that, having that alternative way of verification is so important, is because if an attacker is into a system and is altering things like an invoice, it's very common they also alter the contact information that's on that invoice as well. So when you see that bank account change and you call the number that's listed on the invoice, what you may not realize is that you may actually be speaking to a scammer directly, who of course is just going to convince you that that bank account change is completely genuine. Having a process in place to verify those changes is a really important step as well.
Yeah, these are really sophisticated systems that they've put into place. And a lot of these people have become really good actors as well. So they sound like Carol from the bank, they really do.
especially the ones over the phone. They've almost got an exact script that they run by. It seems like sometimes, so they know what to say. They've got things prepared for whatever you're about to say. In fact, the only time that I found that they didn't have something ready to go is when I just absolutely confronted them, saying, "I know you're a scammer," and then they hang up because they don't know what to do there. But also, I'm not allowed to engage scammers on the phone, so don't tell anyone that I said that. Moving on.
Well, Sam, you're famous now. Like everyone knows that you're Sam Leggett, the the CERT NZ own your online guy. So they're not going to be able to attack you anymore, I think.
Absolutely. What did we say earlier? World famous in New Zealand cybersecurity, I think, is the accurate term.
That's what we were saying earlier. Yeah.
Alrighty, let's get into some specific tips that we're going to go a little bit deeper on. Now, passwords are a huge topic, and I honestly could talk about these for multiple hours, which a lot of people would enjoy. I'm a little bit unique in that sense. But what are some keys around creating a decent password? The first thing is that longer is, of course, stronger, and that's a pain. So when you get a new account and you're creating your password for it, you may see that the account or the platform requires a minimum of 12. And so human nature is to go, okay, what's a password that I can create that's exactly 12 characters long, because that way I'll be able to remember it. Reality is, the longer you can make that password, the stronger it's going to be. But the other important thing is that we can't really base our passwords on personal information anymore, because so much of our information is online and it's accessible to anyone a lot of the time. If our passwords are based on that information, it's too easy to guess and it's too easy to crack. What is a very common attack tactic is to look up social media for an account that's trying to be breached, gather a bunch of personal information like first name, last name, pet's name, addresses, dates of birth, relevant numbers to an individual. And I'm sorry, but if you're on this call and your password is your pet's name and your year of birth afterwards and the capital letter at the start, it's not good. So I do encourage you to go change that and create a half decent password. And one way that you can do that is with a passphrase of 4 or more words. Now, there's a few ways you could approach this. This could be a phrase that's taken from your favorite book. It could be the name of your favorite album, something like that. The key here is that it's not online. It's not information that anyone could go and find about you personally. It may be 4 random words that have no association to them, to each other whatsoever, but 4 words that have some kind of meaning to you. One thing that I always think about in terms of a passphrase password, I really like the saying, "Don't fix what isn't broken." You'd have to know me pretty well to know that I like that saying. It's not something that's online anywhere. So I could start with that, and I could make some changes to that phrase to create a decent password for myself.
Are you revealing some information to us, Sam? Is this stuff you shouldn't be telling us?
No, I use a password manager, so we've got no worries
Okay.
there. I don't even know what my passwords are, to be completely honest with you. But the other thing that we need to do is avoid some really common patterns that we often use. So say I take that passphrase. Of course, I'm going to have some capital letters, probably going to have some symbols, and I'm probably going to have some numbers. A lot of people will think, okay, well, if I need a symbol, I'll take the A that's in that word, and I'll change it for an at symbol. And that way I've got the symbol that I need. Okay, well, now I need a number. Okay, well, I'm probably going to have to change this password in 3 months. So if I start with a 1 at the end, in 3 months' time, I can change it to a 2. And then when I must again, I can change it to a 3. And that's nice and easy. I can remember that. And look, that's human nature, and I absolutely understand why we're doing that, because most people these days have about 160 online accounts. Are you going to create a strong, unique password for every single one? No one's going to be able to do that. So the next thing that I recommend is that you actually start with the accounts that are most important to you. Now, in the individual space, this is often things that look like our bank accounts, our email accounts, because that's what's tied to all our other accounts. And so if that gets breached, then possibly our other accounts are breached as well. Social media, and then any sort of government accounts like IRD or RealMe, these kinds of things. Those really important accounts are the places that we should be starting with strong, unique passwords. Get good ones on there, and look, you're probably in a much better position than you were if you had the same password across all your accounts. Now, for your business, this might look slightly different. It's probably, again, going to be your business email accounts, because they're often linked to other accounts. Again, it's probably going to be the bank account for your business, may even be some social media accounts, but it may also be some online assets or services that you use. So maybe you use a cloud backup service provider. And so that's probably a really critical account for your business. And so you're going to want a long, strong, unique password there as well. At the end of the day, the longer it is, the better it is. Don't use personal information. Avoid those common patterns. and have unique passwords on those important accounts. We've already mentioned have I been pwned, but you can use that to see if your passwords have been caught in a data breach. And so if they do, it's simply a matter of going into that account and changing that password. All right, now the next one, two-factor authentication, is probably the one that I talk about the most in all the circles that I talk about cybersecurity. Why is that? It's because it's simply that powerful. 2FA can go a long way to preventing the vast majority of things that we see reported to us at CERT New Zealand, and oftentimes it's actually free. So again, I recommend starting with those critical accounts. Again, the reality is that 2FA can be a pain. Look, I log into my work computer at my desk, and I have to go through two-factor authentication challenges every single time. It gets annoying. The reality is I know how far that goes to protecting my accounts, my organization, my workspace, etc. And so I do it every time, even if somewhat with a heavy sigh, because it's so powerful in terms of protection. It's an additional layer of protection on top of our username and passwords, and actually can act as a bit of an alert when our usernames and passwords are breached. So if someone's trying to log in and it's not you, and you get a two-factor authentication challenge, that signals that someone else is trying to log in. You may need to go change the password for that account. 2FA looks different in a lot of places. It's actually referred to differently in many places. It might be multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, two-step verification, I think are the most common terms. And it may be a code that's sent to you via text message. It may be a code generated within an authenticator app. It may be a code generated by the website that you need to plug into an authenticator app. Sometimes it's actually a phone call that has a code, an automated phone call that has a code. Sometimes it's a biometrics challenge, and sometimes it's a physical key that looks like a little USB stick that you plug in and hit the button when you're logging in. So there's a lot of different forms. Some are better than others. If you can shy away from the text-based 2FA, I do encourage that. Maybe look at an authenticator app a little bit more. But having some form of two-factor authentication, again, is a lot better than having nothing. So if the only one available to you is text-based 2FA, I would still strongly encourage that you get that in place, especially on those really critical business accounts that you have. Very quickly on updates. Getting updates as soon as possible for your apps and your devices, operating systems, etc., is really, really important. While phishing is probably the most common intrusion vector for the vast majority of attacks, vulnerability exploitation is probably the next biggest. And actually, vulnerability exploitation can often result in the lateral movement of attackers within environments. So it's not just about getting the latest features for our applications. Updates actually address those security vulnerabilities as well. So get those updates as soon as possible. Enable them to be installed automatically wherever you can. And that's going to go a long way to keep yourselves nice and safe. Now, as an employee, you might be working away at some really important work, and you get that little pop-up in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and it says, you need to update, would you like to do it now? And look, we've all hit remind me later, remind me tonight, remind me in 7 days. We've all done that. And maybe that critical work that you're working on, you need to get that done before you can consider restarting your laptop. That's understandable. But not deferring that for as many days as possible and actually installing it as soon as you can is a really important step to take that individual employees can sort of enable themselves.
I think this is the one from our last meeting that I found really, really the easiest, right? It's just so easy. It's so easy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's simply knowing that these updates are actually addressing security vulnerabilities rather than just giving us the latest features. As soon as we know that and acknowledge that, then we can kind of understand the importance of getting those updates as soon as possible.
Well, I mean, that's immediately how I've been thinking about it now since you brought that to my attention, Sam. I think, okay, this could be cybersecurity stuff. Let's do it. And we update it. So yeah, thank you for that.
That's a win then. And then
me and your mom, both of us.
Exactly. That's two people at least. So we're making progress. The next one's privacy. And basically this comes back to that personal information that we've talked about before. If your password is built on personal information that can be found online, your password is at risk. But also, as we've talked about, personal information that can be found on us can be used against us to create narratives of phishing campaigns. Privacy settings on your social media accounts is all about just making sure you know who can see that information. and understanding how that information may be used against you. So if you can, I strongly recommend jumping into your online accounts and changing that to private. Now, for a business, that might not be as possible. You kind of want your social media for your business to be pretty public, and that's understandable. But separating that out from your personal accounts is a really important step to take. Separating that business information and that personal information is going to keep that personal information a little bit safer. Then the last one, which we're going to go a little bit more in depth on when we look at some phishing. I'm running out of time for questions and answers, so I'm going to try to get through this really quickly. Is just thinking before you click on stuff. So if you get that text message and it's got a link in it and you're not sure about it, as Georgia kind of said, don't act out of that urgency. Nothing's that urgent. Just take a moment, take a breath, look at some of the keys that we're going to talk about. Maybe have a talk to a friend or family member. Maybe even if at that point you still can't be sure, check out on your online. Check out the scam checker tool. Maybe report it to CERT New Zealand, because we can give you some advice that will help you determine whether or not it's legitimate or not. The key here is don't act out of that fear, out of that panic, or out of that sense of urgency. Or if you've got other stuff going on in your life that's a little bit distracting or consuming your brain power, then again, don't simply click on that because you're worried about other stuff as well.
There was a comment actually quickly that came up earlier, and I wanted to save it until this section of our presentation. So Scott is saying, we are seeing in our sphere phishing emails that are quite smart, open with the correct name and the correct name and title of the person who sent the email. The sender's email and address seems okay or plausible, but is not the correct one. There are no links, but this is an obvious starting point in a phishing campaign. So what happens within these phishing emails where there's not a link? What are they trying to get? Just to know that there's a person on the other end who's going to answer? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it can be a range of things, and it might just be simply trying to open a dialogue to then initiate other types of scams. Most commonly, what we see, if there's no link included, or if there's no phone number included, or even an email address to get back to that isn't the one that sent you, is that often things that come out of that are things like gift card scams. Now, it sounds a little bit funny, but what a gift card scam is essentially pretending to be someone within an organization of authority, usually, sending an email to someone else saying, hey, I need a little bit of help with something. Do you have time? And usually that's the entirety of the first message, is just opening that conversation. Once you respond to that, that's when they say, I need you to go out and buy $500 gift cards, iTunes gift cards. These are rewards for client employees, and we're going to be giving them out soon. So can you go grab those for me and then send me the codes? What you don't realize is that you're actually talking to a scammer. Once you give them the codes, you've essentially given them the money behind the gift cards. And that's the most common one that we see when there's no links included. Having said that, it can often be situations where they might actually just be phishing for personal information through a conversation. What was really great in the question is that the call out that the email address looked okay, but it wasn't the right domain. And that's a really important thing to note, because attackers and scammers, they want these things to look as similar as possible. But even in that comment, I'm not sure the name of the person that made that comment, but they noticed that that domain wasn't the correct one. And that's the most important thing to take out of that. You were spot on. And if you've noticed that, that should be a really decent red flag for you. And actually, in that sense, familiarizing yourself with the genuine websites or domains of the organizations that you're working with is a really powerful step. Really great example, NZTA, commonly used in phishing scams. Their domain is nzta.govt.nz. We've even seen scams on nzta.co.nz. So how similar does that, how genuine does that sound? But the reality is that's not their actual domain, and that's how we can tell that it's not coming from who it's claiming to come from. But you're absolutely right, these things are particularly sophisticated and they're always getting better. But these things that we can check for, who it's come from, the sender email address, any links present, what they're asking us to do, etc. These are the common things that we can check for, even as the narratives do get more sophisticated. Look, the next section was going to be looking at phishing examples specifically, which I'm more than happy to jump into. However, I do acknowledge that there's only a little bit of time left, so it may be a good time to look at the questions and answers. Georgia, what do you think we should do here?
I am going to ask those who are in attendance right now, if you have questions. We've been sort of answering them as we go. So if you have any questions that you want to ask them right now. And Sam, if you're okay to go a little bit over, I'd love to get into the email phishing. So while we're going over this, pop your questions in there and we'll address them. Yeah.
Awesome. All righty.
Also, because this is my favorite topic. I don't know if Sam and I talk offline occasionally, and I'm like, this is my favorite topic. Let's go. Get in there.
Yeah. All right, let's dive in then. We've got a couple examples of email phishing on screen at the moment. Now, chances are you've probably received one of these yourself if you're watching. The NZTA one is particularly common at the moment. But there's a couple common things that we can look through for both of these. Now, the first one that we look at, which we've already talked about, is the email address that it's actually come from. The NZTA one is particularly difficult because, again, no reply at nzta.co.nz. That looks perfectly legitimate. And you could genuinely believe that belongs to NZTA. However, we know that NZTA's domain is nzta.govt.nz. So we know that this email has not come from NZTA, no matter how convincing that email domain does look. However, changing tack, if we look at the IRD example, that email address is particularly bad. Nothing to do with IRD whatsoever. I have no idea what biglobe.ne.jp is, but that is a Japan top-level domain, and so, again, has nothing to do with IRD. Simply looking at the email address it's come from is the most important thing. Now, one important thing to call out is that when we look at that from line at the top of this email, it does say Inland Revenue initially. We actually have to look at the exact email address to know that it's not Inland Revenue, and that's an important thing to acknowledge. I think it's, I have Outlook on my phone, and I think often Outlook only displays the display name when you're just looking at an email rather than the full email address it's come from. So you need to click on the display name to see the email address. The important takeaway there is look at the email address itself, not the display name, because that can be changed pretty easily. The next thing that we're looking at is what are they asking us to do? Where are they asking us to go? What are they trying to get us to do, essentially, here? In the NZTA example, they're asking us to click on a link. They're claiming that our registration for our car needs to be renewed and it needs to be done pretty soon. Now, in emails like this, it's very common that the link they're trying to get you to click on simply looks like a button. The good news on your computer is that you can hover over that button with your mouse and you'll be able to see the full link that it's actually asking you to click on. In this case, nzta.dnsdojo.com. Again, nothing to do with NZTA. It's not on NZTA's appropriate domain. So we know that web page is not one that belongs to NZTA. That's our second red flag that this is a scam. The IRD example is a little bit different. They're not asking us to click on a link or a button. They're asking us to email a specific email address. However, again, we know that one's not an IRD email address, even though it does look somewhat okay. irdgovtnz.com. If you were looking at that quickly, I could see how some people would glaze over and maybe think it's legitimate. But again, that highlights the importance of really looking specifically at the email address. We know that that's not IRD's domain. So again, we know that email is not going to IRD.
And I'm just going to add in here. I know that I'll get these and I'll think, okay, it looks sort of legit, right? It says IRD, it says GOVT. So then I'll actually go to the actual IRD website and then try to match that up.
Nice.
I get really freaked out by these things. So I'm hyper vigilant.
That's a great step to take. And again, that's familiarizing yourself with the genuine website, the genuine domain that organization is on. And that's what enables you to know that this email address it's come from is not legitimate. The email address they're asking us to send to is not legitimate as well. So that's a really important step. And it's great to hear that you're doing that.
Great, Sam. You can add that to your agenda. You guys over there at CERT, you're welcome.
Absolutely, thank you. The next thing that we can look at is just the context of these things. It sounds a little bit silly, but if you get an NZTA email claiming that you need to renew your registration, do you have a car? Have you recently renewed that registration? Is this actually applicable to you? I know it sounds silly, but these are important things to look out for. Too many times have we seen people reporting things which haven't fallen for them, thankfully, but reporting things like, I got a text claiming that there was an issue with my ANZ bank. I bank with Westpac, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but these are all important cues to take away. If it's not applicable to you, it's probably not legitimate. Those are a few things to look at in email phishing, but again, head to Own Your Online, head to the scam check, and that's going to give you a few additional prompts as well. Unfortunately, it's not just emails. Text message phishing is a big thing at the moment. It may be even bigger than emails at the moment. You're probably all getting these kinds of text messages as well. And this really started to ramp up during COVID lockdown periods where everyone had packages that were being delivered. And so it was so easy to start sending text messages out saying, hey, your parcels needs to be delivered. You need to give us some details. Just click here and we'll get that sorted. A few examples on screen. Again, We're going to look at the same stuff though. Where has it come from? What's the number that it's actually been sent from? In all these cases, they're individual mobile numbers. In some cases, they're actually Australian mobile numbers. Now, the reality is if a big organization like any on screen, NZTA, BNZ, or NZ Post, are contacting their customers through text message, the chances are that they need to send so many text messages that they will use a text service, and their text will come from a short code number. That's typically a 3 or a 4-digit number. If you get a text message from a really big organization, but it's come from an individual mobile number, that is a big red flag that you're probably dealing with a scam. The next thing that we can look for is, again, what are they asking us to do? Are they asking us to click on a link, call a number? What's the call to action within these messages? Vast majority of text-based scams we see are asking people to click on a link. And so again, we can look at the link they're actually asking us to click on. The examples that we have on screen are nzpost.life. It's definitely not nzpost. bnzauthDetails.com. There's some legitimate sounding things in there, but we know that's not BNZ's domain. And NZTA actually has a shortened link, t.ly/pay.nzta.govt. None of these are the legitimate domains of these businesses, and so that's our second red flag that this is probably a scam. And again, the content of the message. NZTA, vehicle registered in your name. Do you have a vehicle registered in your name? BNZ, there's a temporary restriction on your account. Do you bank with BNZ? NZ Post, your package needs some attention to be delivered. Do you have a package that you're waiting for? If it's not applicable to you, that's another really good indication that you are probably dealing with a scam. Again, though, you can jump on your online, go to the scam check tool. That's going to give you some additional prompts. And if it gets down to it, you're just not sure, something doesn't seem right, you've talked to family and friends, they're a little bit concerned as well, you can always report to CERT New Zealand, and we will try to gather as much information as we can to help you determine whether or not what you're dealing with is legitimate or a scam. And that's everything that I have today. I'm not sure if we have any questions come through in the interim.
No, I think, Sam, this is such a thorough presentation. This is what's so great about it. And we have had questions that we did answer. I don't know why. I don't know why I get so excited. It's sort of like piecing together a puzzle and getting the puzzle to fit. Like you're just figuring it all out. And what I like about this is it takes that fear away from it. It takes the fear factor away from, oh my God, there's someone in the ether who's trying to get me. And we're just saying like, no, the more knowledge we have, the better. And just for everyone to know, this is not a how to become a cyber scammer, although the more you know how they're going for it, the better you'll understand how to protect yourself. And that's what's so great about these presentations, Sam. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise with us, sharing your time with us. Everyone who's come to listen, thank you for coming along. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Sam, before I release you into your day?
Just that I hope everyone's taken something away from today, even if that's just that you can go to Own Your Online to check out more information and learn a little bit more about cybersecurity. That's definitely a win. Hopefully everyone listening today can take some kind of action to improve their own security, in which case you'll be in a much better position than maybe you were yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, everybody. And come back again. And Sam, I'm going to drag you in 2024, and we're going to do more of this because this seems to be my favorite topic. It's such a great platform. It's a great platform.
Yeah, I certainly hope so, because there's always more to talk about cybersecurity. So as much as we can share that information and those messages, we're definitely keen to do so.
Okay, great. Well, everyone have a beautiful rest of your week and have a great weekend. And we'll see you again next time. Bantewa.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Georgia.